Hello and welcome. This is Teresa Litchfield, and I'm excited to be able to share with you today my Altenew Education Certification Program Level 2 Challenge. I was asked to make 4 masculine cards plus an upcycle project, and using 3 of the classes that I took. The first class I'm going to use is Beyond Basic Backgrounds, and with each card I'm going to show a different background that I'll explain. The second class is In the Mood for Color, and with this I found some color palettes that really inspired me. Each color has a meaning to it also. The third class is Let It Shine, and I have something shiny on each card plus the gift box that I'll explain as I make it. My first card, I'll use a variety of blues, which means sky and sea, trust, loyalty, and wisdom. I start off by using the geometric roulette stencil on a panel of 5.5 by 5.5 medium blue cardstock. And I'm going to use pixie spray to temporarily adhese this because it is a very intricate stencil. I use a medium-sized blending brush and the Azurite crisp dot ink from Altenew to blend on this, and I chose the 5.5 size square card because I wanted to see the whole stencil on this. And I just keep blending it until I get a good blend. I love stenciling. I love the effect you get with it. I'm going to use the Spheres and Spiral stamp set, and I'll take the largest die from that and cut it from navy cardstock. After I cut that out, I'll place the negative space in my MISTI so I can line up the coordinating stamp with it, and then I'll place the positive piece back in so I can stamp this. With Versamark ink, I'm going to heat emboss this, and I'm just rubbing on the stamp because I've never used it before to condition it, and I'll use my anti-static powder bag also, and stamp a couple times with the Versamark ink. I used Altenew's Platinum Embossing Powder on this piece. I used the second largest stamp in this set, and I'm stamping on a light gray cardstock with the Dark Night ink. And I'm going to stamp that a couple times to make sure it's stamped really good. There is a coordinating die for this set, but I'm going to use a plain circle die that I have just to cut this out, and I'm going to place it under the first image that I stamped. There are so many ways to layer this set, and it's just fun to play around with them and see what you come up with. I'll take the third largest circle from the set, and I'll cut that 4 times out of white cardstock and once out of navy. And then I'm going to layer the white under the navy after I'm done stamping and embossing. I'll again place the negative piece from the die cut in my MISTI and line up this stamp. The stamps are pretty easy to line up with because of the edge on them. I'll stamp that a couple times with Versamark ink and then emboss it with Hero Art's Satin Pearl Embossing Powder. I'll glue all those die cuts together using Gina K Connect glue. I like a liquid glue for this because then I can situate them all in the right place. I will put the navy blue one on top when I'm done with that, and this will pop it up in the center of the card. I love the look of these when they're laid together. To create the center, I used the smallest circle die from the set, cut that and rubbed Versamark on it, and then heat embossed it using the Platinum Embossing Powder. I did that 3 times to get a thick layer of embossing. I wanted to add a dynamic edge around the stenciled background, so I just take Versamark and run it around on 3 sides so I have a place to hold on to, and I'll do that 4th side last. Now I'm going to heat emboss this with the Platinum Embossing Powder. I'm going to use the Live Love stamp set for the outside of the card, and I decided to use the high and make this an I'm Thinking of You card. I'll stamp that with the Distress Oxide in Chipped Sapphire so I can emboss it afterwards with clear embossing powder. And then I'll pop it up on some extra cardstock for added dimension. I added 3 extra cardstock strips underneath my sentiment with liquid glue, and I just cut around them. I like to angle my scissors to the left a little bit so that you can't see the underneath as much. To assemble the card, I'm going to take the background, which ended up being 5 1/4 by 5 1/4, and I'm going to glue that onto a dark gray cardstock, which is 5 1/2 by 5 1/2. I'll take the largest embossed ring and I'll glue the more solid piece, which was the second piece, underneath that with a liquid glue. And then I'll glue both of them to my background. This set totally reminds me of my childhood and playing with spirograph. I'll then add that third popped up piece to the center of those other two and I'll glue that down with my liquid glue. I'll then put the embossed piece I made. It ended up looking like a coin to me, and put that in center, and then I'll put the sentiment on top of that. I use my T-ruler a lot to make sure that things are square and centered, and I'll pop that sentiment on top of that last piece. This high is just a perfect size for that. I'll then add this card to an 5 1/2 by 5 1/2 note card with my liquid glue. This card fits perfectly inside of a 6 by 6 envelope. After I got done making it, I decided I needed a sub-sentiment inside, and so I stamped the sentiment strips "I've been thinking of you" inside of the card. Again, there are so many options with this set. You could use the stamps and dies together or just the stamps. I thought this was a really great set for a masculine card. My next card is going to be a happy birthday card. And even though there's a lot of colors on it, I'm going to predominantly use yellow, and that means happiness, optimism, creativity, and sunshine. I'll start off this card by cutting 1/2-inch strips of all 5 cardstock colors, and I'll lay down some adhesive on a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2-inch panel, and then placing the cardstock strips on the diagonal. I feel like this gives some added interest. I purposefully cut the strips at a 1/2 inch because I wanted to stamp on them with my sentiment, and that was good size for the stamp. I then turn the card over after I have the strips laid down, and I'm going to cut all the ones hanging off the edge. I like to use a long pair of scissors to do that, and then I'll save the extra strips for another card. I'm going to create another textured background that I'm going to pair up with the striped background I made. And I'm going to use the Rustic linen stamp set from Altenew with some butter yellow cardstock and the Butternut crisp dye ink. I placed the cardstock more in the middle of my Misty because this is a really large stamp and I have to stamp it a couple times and really press hard in the center to make sure that it's inked everywhere. I'm going to use 5 different colors of ink that coordinate with my cardstock, and using an acrylic block, I'll stamp the happy birthday sentiment onto each one with a tone-on-tone look. I'll keep stamping the happy birthday until I get down to the second light green strip. On the second dark green strip, I'm going to heat emboss that with gold embossing powder. And after that, I'm going to cut that panel off and then add the rustic linen textured background. It was a lot easier just to take off that dark green strip and heat emboss them and then put the strip back on the stripe panel. After I do that, I'm going to cut the ends of that off, again just like I did before. And I'll add some foam tape to this and pop it up on the rustic linen stamp. As you can see, I added lots of foam tape on the back just so it doesn't get smushed in the mail. I added a couple of gold matte cardstock strips along the embossed sentiment on the bottom just to highlight that a bit. I add one with liquid glue down below on the textured background, and then one above that's on the popped up stripe panel piece. I add the finished card front to an A2 size card base. This is Nina, Solar White, 110 pound. And I use this for most of my card making. I love the weight of this. And again, I like to use a liquid glue so I have time to situate things and line them up before things dry. I thought this turned out to be a really simple and fun card, lots of color on it, but perfect for any guy's birthday. My next card will be an anniversary card, and I love nautical. This has blue and red on it, and red means energy and strength, determination, as well as passion. I'll take a piece of navy blue cardstock in 5 1/4 by 4. I want this to be a horizontal card, and I'm gonna put the navy blue onto the watercolor stripe stencil with some purple tape. I'm just gonna take the embossing paste from Altenew right out of the container and apply it to my cardstock and stencil. I really want this to have a lot of texture, so I'm not making it perfect by any means. I'm just applying it with my palette knife pretty randomly and thicken some areas. And then I'll take the stencil off and let this dry. And you want to let it dry for a couple hours. After that was dry, I took the third largest frame from the nesting frame die set and cut that in the center of my stenciled background. I'll then take a piece of fun foam in the same size as the background and trace around that with a pencil so I know where to put my die to cut this out. I place the die on the fun foam and secure it down with some purple tape and run that through my die cut machine. After this is cut, I'll pop that piece out of the fun foam and then glue my fun foam to the background and then place both of those onto the cobalt cardstock. I like to use the liquid glue on the fun foam. I feel like it adheres the best with that. As I'm gluing this together, you can see that I have cut out the frames in the gold and the red. So the gold one is from the same die I used to cut out on the background panel, the third largest, and the red is the next size down. I'm going to pop that in a little bit later on. As I glued this down, I realized I wanted a little bit of gold around the edge, so I'm taking my Versamark pen and running it around the edge, and I'll emboss that with some gold fine embossing powder from Wow. This gives a really wispy, fun look to it. Using the Happy Anniversary stamp from the Sentiment Strip stamps, which I use a lot, and I'm going to heat emboss this with the same gold embossing powder. I use my anti-static powder bag and place the stamp in my MISTI. To make sure things are straight, now I'm kind of funny about that, I use my Creative Corn a lot to make sure that things are in the right place. I'll use my anti-static powder bag and then emboss this using Versamark ink. I stamp it a couple times and then I'm going to emboss it with the gold fine embossing powder again from Wow. I was really excited to finally have my Altenew glue tape to try out, and I used that to adhere a gold foil piece and pop that into that frame. I'll next take the red piece and I cut out a piece of fun foam out of the one I did earlier, and I'm going to pop that up so it's got some fun dimension to this card. And by the way, I love that glue tape. The glue tape is great for cardstock and even the back of the gold foil, but the front of the gold foil is a little bit finicky, so I have found I like to use the liquid adhesive the best. I'll add the finished card front to an A2 top folding card base. I just love how this turned out and I really like the classic style of it. For my fourth card, this is going to be an encouragement card, and I'm going to use the color of teal. It has the calming of blue and the renewal qualities of green, revitalizing and rejuvenating. I learned this style of the card I'm going to use from a Jennifer McGuire video, and I've used it many times. To start making this card, you're going to cut two pieces of 5.5 by 8 inches in the cardstock of your choice. And then you're going to score it at 4 inches on each piece. And then you'll move to, we want to make a flap on this. So you'll open it up and you're going to score again at 2 inches. I like to score with a Teflon bone folder. I usually use that. Sometimes I'll use the Score Pal one, but I prefer the Teflon one. You can see here now, after folding that, you're going to have the two flaps. Eventually, we're going to put those together, so it will be a gatefold card. We're going to take the two loose pieces, and I'm going to put them in my MISTI. But first, we're going to temporarily adhere them to each other so they don't pop open. I just put some temporary adhesive on each flap on the inside so the flaps stay down, and also on the back because we're going to stamp this. The stamp I'm going to use is from the Shine Like a Diamond set. I'm going to use that large background stamp. And I like to position my card in the center of my MISTI so I have lots of room to position the stamp around it. You want to line this stamp up with, I'm lining it up with the center of the card and the diamonds kind of in the center also. I'm going to condition this stamp just by rubbing on it, and then I'll use Versamark and stamp a couple times. You really want to press good on this. I want a good impression, but I did find with this stamp that there's some intricate pieces on it, and you don't want to stamp too hard because I want to heat emboss this. You can also just stamp one panel and cut it and then put it on those flaps. I heat embossed that with the Platinum Crisp embossing powder, and now I'm just going to remove all that temporary adhesive with an adhesive eraser. I wanted to make a surprise sentiment on this card, and so to do that, I'm going to use the fine frame diamond die set, and the third largest one fits perfectly around my sentiment, which also comes from that Shine Like a Diamond set. Everything I'm going to use on this card is from that. I line that die up with the center of the flap. You want to open it up and we're going to cut from both sides of that flap. This die cuts a small frame around it also, and you don't have to use it, but I realized after I made this card you could save it and use it around the sentiment for later if you want to. Now I'll cut from the other side. So we're going to take the other half of this and line it up with the diamonds. I'll take that die and place it in the side that I cut already. You want to make sure that your die cut is in the center so you have one continuous shape with it. I'm going to add a little purple tape to this so it doesn't shift around as I'm cutting it. And then open it up, take that flap off and open it up and add some tape to the inside also. It's going to cut through both sides. You'll see after I cut the second side where I'm going with this card. We're going to make a belly band that hides that sentiment. But now we can put the card together, and so I'm using the Altenew glue tape and just putting those two flaps together. Again, I kind of line them up with the diamonds on the stamping. This is just a fun way to step up a card for a special event, and I have one of those coming up soon. I'm going to take a note card inside, and that's going to be where we're going to put our sentiment. And that is 3 7/8 by 5.5 top folding. I'm going to put that on the inside of that gatefold, and that'll be where you write your message to the recipient. Where that diamond is cut out, you'll see that's where I put the sentiment. I'm going to make a belly band that hides that sentiment on the front of the card where you die cut that. You'll need to measure your die cut that you cut on this to make sure what size of belly band you want. I'm going to take a piece of mustard colored cardstock that is 2 3/4 inches wide, and it could be 11 or 12 inches long. We're going to cut it off later. And you want to score that at 2 inches. And then you're going to move it over from that score and score it again at 4 1/4. And that's the piece that is going to go the closest to the card. My next piece I want is a black cardstock piece. And again, that one is 2 inches wide. Score it again at 2. Move it over. And this one I'm going to score it at 4 3/8 inch. And that's because it's going to go on the outside of that mustard piece. You'll see as you put those two pieces together, the reason you want to score the piece on the outside, which is my black piece, a little bit longer is so that it has room to go around the card. I'm also going to take this dark gray piece, which ended up being 2 1/4 wide by 4 1/4 long, and I'm just going to tuck that piece in so much doesn't have to wrap around the card. I'm going to stamp the large shine stamp from the set on the black piece, and I'm just going to tuck some of that through my MISTI door, which is fine. I use my anti-stick powder tool, and then I'm going to use Versamark and again rub on it. I'm going to use Versamark a couple times, and I'm going to heat emboss this again with the platinum embossing powder. To assemble the belly band, I'm going to glue the dark gray piece to the underside of the black one that I just embossed, and then we'll glue that onto the mustard piece. And I'm just using some Tombow Mono liquid glue. I've been trying out some different glues lately. I'll just fold this where I scored it and then glue it on the back and cut the tail off. For the sentiment, I'm going to use the Creative Corner again so I can line this up with the diamond cutout. I'm going to use the Like the Star You Are from the set with the black pigment ink. I love the black obsidian ink. And I'll stamp that and kind of have to close the gatefold on the card so you can get a good stamping. I'm going to step this up a bit, and I'm going to use the die that's in the fine frame diamond set. That's the 4 little diamonds, and I'm going to cut those out of the teal and the dark gray. These dies really have some intricate frames that come around them, so I'm going to use the stick-it adhesive for the diamonds and the frames to adhere them around that sentiment. This really is a great adhesive choice for any intricate die. I place them on the adhesive, rub the release paper on it to make sure all the adhesive gets on the back, and then place them on my project. And you can move it around until you like where it's placed, and then just rub on it really good and it will be permanent. For a little more shine, I'm going to use the Nouveau Crystal Glaze on those diamonds. And I just put a little bit on there, come in with my craft pick, and move it around so I don't use too much. And while it's wet, you can do this. I'll cover all those diamonds with the crystal glaze and do the same technique with all of them. And now I like to let this dry overnight. You can see when it dries how much shine that has, and I thought it was perfect for the theme of my card. I like to pinch closed my card to get that belly band on and off. It makes it a lot easier to do that. And it's fun for the recipient to see when they open it what's behind. For my upcycle project, I'm going to use a gift box that was given to me. I've always loved to gift wrap, and this turned out really fun with some of the Altenew products I used on it. For the box, it's really fun because it actually opens up all the way, and I decided to use some washi tape on it. I'll use 3 different washi tapes on this. I'm going to use the tuxedo washi tape to cover it, and then I'll use that for you die. It's kind of a hanging tag. A little trick I saw I thought I would try is taking a piece of cardstock and putting it on the end of the washi. So when you pull it off, you pull it all off in one piece. And the washi can tear a little bit, and so this really helps a lot. I cover that, and then I'm going to pull that piece of cardstock off after I cut it, and I'll replace that. I'm covering both sides of that flap that closes the box, just so when you open it, it's covered also. So again, I'm going to cover that, and the fun thing about the washi is that it sticks together. My stencil pile came in really handy to get any wrinkles out, and I just used a long pair of scissors to cut around the other side of that flap. I'm going to cover this row by row, lining up that grid with each one, and I'll replace that cardstock piece every time I cut it off. That really has helped a lot to get that to come off in one straight piece. The stencil pile is also really handy for that. I use my craft knife and a ruler to cut it off on the edge, and then I can come in with my scissors and clean that up if I need to. This box has some corners that I needed to cut into so the box could fold back up, and I just do that with the long scissors again. On the corners of the front flap, it wasn't really staying down, so I just added some liquid glue to that, and I can put the box back together. I thought this was such a fun gift box, and it's reusable because of the way it closes. I'm going to embellish the box with some rosettes, and the largest one is going to be cut at 1¾ wide by 9½, and I'm just using some scraps that I had from another project. I'm going to score that all the way down every 1/2 inch, and you're going to need 2 of those. And then you're going to fold it up like an accordion, and that's what's going to become your rosette. I just pinched that tight at the end to reinforce the folds on it. The smaller one is 1 inch wide by 9½, and again it's with the scraps. And I'm going to score that at 1/4 inch all the way down. And you'll only need 1 of those. Again, you're going to fold it up like an accordion. And at the end, pinch it again just to reinforce it. It's a lot easier to score it before you put the washi tape on it than after, so you don't worry about tearing it. I'm using the Grand Stream washi on the large rosette, and I decided to do this in 2 pieces instead of turning it and doing it 1 piece all the way down. There was a lot more waste that way. Plus, it looks a lot better when you make the rosette. It looks better to have it at this angle. I'll accordion that back up after I put the washi tape on it, and it's really easy to do because we've already scored it. And so there's half of it, and then we need to do the other half. The small one, I'm going to use the brushed grid washi on that one and do the same thing, but again, you only have to do 1. I hook them together by overlapping the fold. If you're going to use the glue tape, make sure you leave a place with that washi tape on it, or use a liquid glue or a glue gun. I used some circle dies to cut out the base for the rosettes. The large one, I used a 2-inch die. On the smaller one, I used a 1¼ inch die. To glue these to the base, it's really best to use a glue gun. And I would just put some glue on the base, and then I'll come in with that rosette, kind of smush it down in the center and make that circle, and hold it there for a second until it dries. It doesn't take very long. To top them off, I'm going to take some circle dies and my black cardstock. For the large one, it's a 1.5 inch circle, and for the small one is 3/4 of an inch. And again, I'm just going to use the glue gun to glue those on top. I'll show again how I put those together, and this time I'm going to use the glue gun. I put glue right in that fold and then overlap them to put them together. I'll put glue on that base and hold the rosette together. And putting it down on the glue, I'm just going to keep a hold of it in the center to keep it tight until it dries. The glue gun dries really fast. After I'm done with that, I'll again put the black cardstock circle on this, and again it was 3/4 of an inch circle, and glue that on. It stays really good with the glue gun. I'm going to embellish the rosettes with some buttons that I had. I've been collecting buttons for a long time, and I found a couple that I thought would be really pretty to just fancy this up a bit. I cut the shank off with some wire cutters, and I'm just going to glue those down with a glue gun as well. I cut the Fancy For You die out of gold glitter cardstock, and then I'm going to cut it out of gray that I had left over from my last project. A couple of adhesive options on this intricate die would be to use a liquid glue, which is what I use, a spray adhesive, or the stick-it adhesive would also be a good choice. I glue those two gray pieces together, and then I'm going to glue the glitter piece on top just to give it some stability. I'm going to take a length of ribbon and tie it around the box, and the reverse grip tweezers are super great to hold on to that, especially when it's a really slippery satin ribbon. And I tie a square knot bow. I learned how to tie this from my mom a long time ago. I use my sewing scissors to clean up the edges on my bow. I'm just cutting them on an angle to make them look pretty. The ribbon I'm using is from Paper Source. I keep a lot of these on hand, and I think it just makes the gift even more special. I'm using a gold glitter string that I had, and I'm tying that onto the For You die. I thought this would be fun to hang it on the front of the package. I'm going to glue that underneath the biggest rosette, and then I'll glue the rosettes onto the package. I glued those onto the front of the box with the glue gun, but after a couple days they fell off and I realized I needed to use something a little bit stronger. So I used the E6000 glue, which I use around the house a lot and for some crafting projects. The box was so fun to create, and I loved using the washi tape on it. I thought this turned out really fun, and it could be used for a masculine or feminine, and it could be reused over and over again. Thank you for watching. I'm really grateful you spent the time with me today. Please like, subscribe, and ring that bell for all the notifications.